Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the American Academy. I'm McGill. I'm the head of communications here at the Academy and the editor of our Berlin Journal. Thanks for joining us for tonight's Nina Maria Garson lecture, New Works on Empire, Ecology, and the Nonhuman by artist Candice Lin. I'm told I'm supposed to switch this to the opening slide first. Before I introduce Candice, just briefly, I want to say a word about the fellowship. That makes and the sort of founding donor that makes this fellowship possible. The Nina Maria Garson Fellowship was established in 2011 through the generous support of the late Nina von Maltzan, born Garson. Nina was a founding trustee of the American Academy and the granddaughter of Hans and Ludmilla Arnold, in whose erstwhile home we are sitting right now. Their daughter, Ellen Maria, was Nina's mother. Born in Germany and raised in New York after her family fled Nazi persecution, Nina pursued her studies in Switzerland and later married Lothar von Maltzan in 1990. Nina's philanthropic spirit was wide-ranging, from her leadership as chairwoman of the Curtis Institute of Music to volunteer work in Uruguay to her lasting impact here in Berlin. She was not only a dear friend of the Academy, but also one of its most devoted and long-serving trustees. And if you come back in the spring, you can see a garden dedicated to her in the backyard. Since its inauguration, the Nina Maria Garson Fellowship has supported 2 outstanding fellows per academic year, and we're truly fortunate this semester to have Candice. Candice Lin is an interdisciplinary artist who teaches at UCLA and works with installation, drawing, video, and living materials and processes such as mold, mushrooms, bacteria, fermentation, and stains, and other things that she'll tell you about that are rated R. Her work confronts issues of race, gender, and sexuality through matter, entangled with histories of colonialism and migration. Lin has had recent solo exhibitions in 2025 at Gallery Hyundai in Seoul, UCC Clay in Yingxing, China, Jameel Art Center in Dubai, and London's Whitechapel Gallery, where her work is on view until March 2026. She's also had shows at Talbot Rice Gallery at Edinburgh and Canal Projects in New York, and she was in the 24th City Biennial in 2024 and the 59th Venice Biennale in 2022. Candice is the recipient of the 2024 Ruth Award, the 2023 Arnaldo Pomodoro Sculpture Prize, a 2022 Gold Art Prize, and a 2019 Joan Mitchell Foundation Award, among others. Her work is part of the permanent collections of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, and the Walker Center, among others. And now I'll stop so it's not super embarrassing for you. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping remarks for those of you who have been here before. You sort of know the rules of the road here. Candice will speak for about 35 minutes. Then she'll take your questions in a Q&A. If you're in the room, simply raise your hand and our colleague will come around with the microphone. If you are joining us via Vimeo, type your questions into the Q&A. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you, RG, for that introduction. I feel like maybe my job is done. Thank you to the American Academy for inviting me here as a fellow. It's been an absolute delight. Actually, I wasn't so sure in the beginning, but I have been really enjoying myself after I got into it. And really, thank you to all my fellows that I've been enjoying all the wonderful conversations that we've been having together, and fellows, partners, and kids. Also, great conversation at the kid dining table. There was a really excellent presentation that most of you missed, given by one of the fellows' kids. That will be a hard act to follow, but I will try my best. So I'm going to start out with a little overview of some of my past work, because I think a lot of people don't know my work, and then I will talk about 3 recent projects. So a lot of my past work has looked at colonial and imperial histories of materials, as RJ mentioned, and I look at specifically the way that our desire for aesthetic properties like color or texture. So for example, with this piece with porcelain, the whiteness and hardness or translucency of the material has shaped histories of global trade. and imperial and colonial conquest and different wars like the Opium Wars, as well as scientific technologies and city infrastructure. For example, the use of porcelain as a filter for bacterial studies and for toilets, of course, and hygiene and sanitation systems. And a lot of my work is also tied to thinking about histories of disease and contamination and how those things are racialized in a kind of colonial model. And I recently lost my voice and sounded like a Muppet. So I'm going to try my best to not have that happen, because that would be funny. This is a work where there are porcelain slip cast busts that I made of conquistadors who are thought to have died of bacterial causes, and they're upside down and hollow to catch the rainwater that we get very little of in LA, and filter it down to a chamber below that has fermenting tea and sugar. A lot of my work also focused on histories of colors, such as cochineal, which is an insect grown in LA and like Mexico and that area. And in this work, I was mixing it in a basin that is my proportions outstretched by Truvy and Candice, made with cochineal, opium poppy seeds, and tea and sugar. And it is slowly dripping into another room, making a colonial stain, if I may, a blood red stain that grows slowly darker over time. And I've been really interested in this idea of thinking about this kind of libidinal economy of like how our desire, our very basicness, has shaped these kinds of human histories. And a lot of time I work with fluids, or often bodily fluids like this, and fermenting tea and tinctures of plants that have properties of matter that are steeped in them and that are often circulated through the installation as a way to talk about the way they circulate globally in trade and from raw material into human society. And a lot of these fluid processes in my installations change over time. So this was a porcelain bedroom made out of 1,000 kilograms of Limoges porcelain that was watered and kept moist unsuccessfully by the distilled piss of visitors who came. And it's also about the act of taking something that maybe is socially seen as waste and thinking about how we come up with categories of value, and also the fragility of marginalized narratives and what keeps them from disappearing or erasing, getting erased in dominant history. So a lot of my work looks at history and memory, but looks at things that are often left out of archives, like literally in this case, the image on the, what is that? This side, is this image by a German Frankfurt-born naturalist, Maria Sibylla Merian, who traveled to colonial Dutch Suriname and was looking for different replacements for the silkworm, and found this plant that this is the acid burn, which is called a ghost, that's left in the archive. And it's the acid burn of the pigment of this plant that was used for abortions. And then after she died, her book was printed, and later editions of the book edited that information out, as well as the information that she learned about this abortificant plant from Indigenous and enslaved women. And often the material that I'm researching and making an installation about also has a quality of the other, or a kind of exoticism, a stranger that one desires but also fears. And I'm going way back here because it just recently came up when I was doing some work in the Azores while I was here. But the scientist Lynn Margulis has this theory of coevolution, where it was a kind of feminist challenge to this idea of social Darwinism, that we evolved through competing and beating our chests together or something. And instead, she said, we evolved through coevolution, through these kind of ways that cells came into each other and tried to eat each other or take parts of each other, and that this new multicellular form got made out of the long-lasting intimacy of strangers, this moment when one cell tried to metabolize another but couldn't make one reducible to itself. So it's this really beautiful kind of metaphor that is also metonym, is actually real in cellular science. And I wanted to think about that encounter of coevolution and the violence within that, as well as the possibilities of mutualistic or commensal kind of relationships of coevolution within a kind of colonial metaphor. These are drawings that I made in 2015 when I was trying to translate her theories into like a language that I could get down with and understand more. In the work I was doing on indigo, there are these moments of colonialism or imperialism where the violence done to the colonized creates its own visual language, either through a kind of syncretic symbol where there's like a adoption of a dominant colonizer's symbols, but with resistance and double meaning, or a kind of hybridity created through that. So I made that textile you saw, that big one on the floor, that became a tent, and it's printed with all these hand-cut stencils where I looked at historical stencils like these, where the Dutch and Portuguese letter forms in the white and black image are recomposed as a kind of like, ooh, this is cool. Just like people get like tattoos with like Chinese script and they don't know what they say. So it's kind of like that. And also in the Adire textiles from Nigeria, you can see the influence of the one before British colonization and the one after independence, where these kind of motifs of the crown or the Union Jack find their way into these kind of more geometric designs. So I was interested in thinking about these materials used in art making that have histories laden with colonialism as and slavery, as a lot of people probably know. Indigo was involved in both, in the way they were produced and circulated, but also the visual languages that emerge from those violent encounters. This is another example, but not from my work. Deborah Silverman has talked about this whiplash motif in a lot of Art Nouveau, where it comes out as this kind of beautiful, sinuous design, but her argument is that sublimated within that whiplash motif is obviously the chicote or the whip. This is for you, Nicolaus. He wrote a book on the whip. And also the vines in the rubber forest of the Belgian Congo. I'm also interested in moments of cultural projection. These kind of moments of fascination or misconceptions, like the figure of George Salmanazar, who was an 18th century European, probably French, who pretended to be from Formosa, present-day Taiwan. And it was kind of this moment before we think of race as being tied to this kind of naturalized idea of it being in the skin. He looked like a blonde, blue-eyed Frenchman. And he performed his Asiatic race by doing things like sleeping upright by the window so everybody could see his silhouette, and eating raw meat spiced with cardamom, which I requested for our dinner, but was turned down. And I was thinking about, here's my segue into Lin Margulis. So last month I was in the Azores, which is an amazing, beautiful place. I was doing a project where I was looking at volcanic rocks, because my new research, which I'll talk to you next about, is about rocks and minerals. And I was thinking about Lin Margulis because as I was thinking about these kind of volcanic histories of rocks, and I was making this kind of clay body made out of volcanic rock, and these glazes, I met this amazing Azorean microbiologist, Paula Aguiar, who runs her business in the Azores, serving this tea that changes into a purple color because of the sulfur and different minerals in the volcanic water. And she told me about this ancestor. So that's our last common, universal common ancestor. I'm going to butcher the name, sulfur hydrogenibium. And it lives in the hot springs in Fernache in Azores, and it also lives in deep in the ocean. And the thing that kind of blew my mind is that this microorganism, it uses oxygen to create chemosynthesis. So we all know, like, plant, what's it called? Synthesis. Plants make oxygen from sunlight, but deep in the ocean where there's no sunlight, there are a lot of microorganisms like sulfury hydrogenibrium. And what they do is, what those arrows are pointing to, this is an image by Paula, are they take pieces of iron and pieces of sulfur into their little bodies, and then they wait. And then when they get hungry or tired, they take oxygen from the water and they oxygenate the iron and the sulfur, and they create energy from that moment. And I thought that that was insane, because I've been thinking a lot about these colonial dichotomies of the human and inhuman, alive versus inert, and the way that we use them to ascribe value, ascribe like animacy. What is alive matters more. What is sentient matters more. But it's always in relationship to the human, right? And it's also structured around like how we think about time. For those of you that saw that the early time blurb or early blurb where I was supposed to be talking about time, I'm talking about time. And so a lot of my research in the last decade or so was thinking about this kind of animacy hierarchy, or the way that beings have matter or meaning in relationship to their animacy. But then I was thinking that sulfuri hydrogenibium is this thing that made me think maybe every being, whether it has a fleshy body or like a minerally chemical body that is not considered alive, desires to find and be like nearby and absorb the energy of another. But sadly, the ones that don't seem to be doing this in a better way is the humans that just seem to be stuck on the parasitic model. Also, when I was in the Azores, there was a wonderful talk by Candice Fujikane, who talked about abundance from the perspective of indigenous wisdom. And I put this in here for Alex because she gave a wonderful talk a couple weeks ago on writing into a post-capitalist world. And in Fujikane's work, she's saying that this capitalism fears abundance, right? But the abundance she's talking about could, if we like pivot soon enough, be a real kind of abundance where we don't need to feel precarity and scarcity that makes us overproduce or go into these models of capitalism. But if we don't pivot soon enough, there will be abundance for others, maybe not for humans. So the example she gave was this artist, Khalili Chun's work, where Waikiki becomes a kind of abundant reef for the fish, but the humans are not around. This is my beautiful studio that the American Academy gives to the artists in residence. And I don't usually make a lot of paintings, but for some reason while I was here, I was making a lot of paintings for the piece I did in Whitechapel, which is a cardboard labyrinth titled Ghosty with a slash, which is the etymology of the word host, which has ghost. No, sorry, it doesn't have ghost. It has guest and stranger within the same word. So thinking about this idea of this kind of abundance or this world that exists after humans, I was making these images of cats because I always make images of cats when I'm depressed about the world. And the cats are often doing things like that look really fun for them, but maybe look a little violent to us. And they are playing with the remnants of things left over from the human world that we've destroyed. So when I was here, I was also like being like, what is Berlin all about? And I found that there are these yellow rags at the Stasi Museum where people would, Stasi people would put a little yellow rag under the chair when you were being interrogated, and then they would save it in a jar so that they could, like, I guess, track you later. I'm not sure. But in my cardboard labyrinth world, the cats have found these yellow rags and they trade them. They have like an erotic fetish where they're like, oh, this one is so good. And they have like these bonfires and they play with the rags. So this was there. And then also arriving at the Academy, I found a wall of Kissinger photos. And I should have done my research, but I didn't know that he co-founded this place. And so I thought I should make a beautiful oil painting of Kissinger as a gift to the American Academy. But then Jamaica let me know that it's okay to be dishonorable. And I was a dishonorable guest because I let the cats get into the painting, and they decided that it was more fun to use his body as a kind of portal to open an underground dance club below. So this is a diptych. So They kind of flow through. It's like when you go and you get those stickers they put over your phone, and then you can go down into the tunnels, and then it opens up, and it looks like they're having a lot of fun down there. Okay, so these are the recent non-human beings that I've been thinking about in recent work. I put a triad in here for Justin. Manganese, lithium, and iron. And I started thinking about minerals and rocks in relationship to the work I do with ceramics. So in ceramics, manganese is a material that is used, and it's also used in industrial processes for a lot of alternative energy batteries and things like that power our smartphones and computers. And I learned this incredible fact last year. Scientists discovered, I guess through a German organization, Geomar, that there was oxygen being produced in the bottom of the sea. And they were like, oh, we know about that. That's sulfur hydrogenium. But actually it wasn't. It's actually the manganese nodules themselves are creating oxygen, kind of like a battery, liberating the oxygen from the H2O. So that kind of fit in with my idea of thinking about the kind of animacy of manganese. This is this kind of beautiful gold crystalline glaze you can make out of manganese. You can also make beautiful black and brown clay bodies out of it. So I made this work as part of the Sydney Biennial that traveled later to Mama in Melbourne and Jameel, and it's titled Nightstone, I Breathe Through My Anus. And it was tracing a moment of early trade between Asia and Australia. So there were these Indonesian Makassar traders who would buy sea cucumbers from First Nation Australians in Diliaquas, and they would sell them then to China. And evidence of this trade, that pre-existed trade with Europe, came in the form of bark paintings like this, where the Indonesian shape of that boat, the prow, can be seen. And the painting is made on bark with yellow and red and white ochres, but it has a background of this dark color, which American and British colonial expedition later, when they tested it, realized was manganese. And they used that to actually pinpoint where these bark paintings were coming from to find places where they could mine manganese. And so I thought that was like a really interesting example of how an artwork can be both an object of beauty. It can be evidence of a kind of lesser known history that we don't talk about within like a kind of Eurocentric model of history. But it can also be used as a tool of colonial mapping and extraction. And it shows this kind of complicated relationship of aesthetics to global politics and history that I'm really interested in. Oh, also, manganese nodules are so cool because they come in all these different shapes. And I learned that the reason is that they grow millimeter by millimeter on top of things in the bottom of the seafloor. So these ones are spiky because they grew on fish bones. And then this one grew on a megalodon tooth. This is like the ancient shark. And they grow a few millimeters in a million years. So one that's like 15, I don't know, centimeters, 15 centimeters, can be up to 15 million years old. The black murals that are painted at the installation version at Jameel Art Center are painted with this black manganese paint. And they depict places where the mining of manganese was done, mostly on Groote Island in Australia, and is still done mostly by Chinese companies. And you'll see that the central moat, also manganese, it's a little reductive, and the gold ceramics, also manganese. And the black moat structure is a reference to these mining sluices that Chinese miners who were indentured laborers in the 19th century came up with as they were brought to mine gold. And I was thinking a lot about, Candice Fujikani also has a book called Asian Settler Colonialism. And I was thinking a lot about what it means to like be forced to, migrate to a place as a lot of the 19th century Asian indentured laborers did, because European imperialism and chaos with the opium wars created so much poverty and chaos and destruction in your hometown that you had to take these kind of horrible labor contracts and move to places and do really hard labor. But then you're also, while your labor is being exploited, you're also a settler. So I don't have any conclusive thought about that, but it was just something I was thinking about in this piece. The sculpture in the middle of the moat rotates, and the ceramics on it with the manganese gold glaze are the prow boat surrounded by disjointed pieces of the Indonesian archipelago. And Indonesia was really central to our ideas of plate tectonics and the field of geology. And the audio piece that plays from that rotating central piece is kind of like meant to look like a giant record. And it tells the story of sea cucumbers. So manganese also is toxic to the body. Toxicity is something that I'm often thinking about with materials. And I am singing. There's a lot of reverb, so you can't tell it's me, hopefully. But I'm singing a song of the sea cucumbers where a ship comes and capsizes, and the manganese falls into the water, and it toxifies the environment where they live, which is quite shallow. And it makes them have to change their semi-heterosexual form of reproduction to one where they split their bodies into a sisterhood, all female, which is something they actually do. Okay, lithium. So as I mentioned, I think a lot about these minerals in relationship to ceramics, and the first project in minerals was actually lithium, because Tesla bought up all the lithium, and it made it like 80 times as expensive within 1 year or something. So we had to relook at all of our lithium glazes in the ceramics lab where I teach at UCLA. And it made me really think about our connection in ceramics to the industrial world. I'm going to play this while I talk. So I made this animation, which is lives inside of a sculptural installation, which I'll show you next. And I was thinking about lithium as well as being in ceramics and industry, as being as also being how it's used in biomedicine. So I think this is probably a bastardized understanding of it, but as I understand, lithium is taken for mania and bipolar because it is able to slow your neural firing in your brain. And so I thought, what if we could think about lithium as a time traveling device where humans' sense of time is getting slowed, and if humans and demons normally travel like this, and then if they both take lithium and it speeds up time for the demons, and then it slows down time for the humans, then they intersect and they see each other in the world, right? So I made this story where this cat sex demon wakes up in a cave next to a corpse that later is revealed to be their own. And inside the body of the corpse, they find a paper mache silkworm filled with lithium batteries. It all makes sense. And they accidentally huff the lithium, and then they time travel back to their past life. And in their past life, they worked in a factory assembling these lithium batteries. And they had a lover, a queer lover, and they got separated somehow. And they don't really understand things. They don't even understand what sex is. They just keep trying different things out, seeing how it makes them feel. I don't know if I can scroll. I won't show all of it. The ending is really good. So they follow this guy, or they follow this. It ends up being they're on, and they end up in the sewer, and then they get flushed into the bathroom of the factory. And in the bathroom, they get their education. They all get in the bathroom, where the menstrual blood demon, who's been in the factory for a lot longer, educates them about the world of the humans. And this conversation is funny because sometimes I usually make my own sound effects, but occasionally I like to look on sound effect databases. And this one was called Asian Sound.
何gì gì
So there-
hoàn toàn gì rồi hoàn toàn gì bé đi hoàn toàn何gì hoàn toàn gì
Asian Sound. So they're in this factory, and the faces of these factory workers are actually ripped from virtual influencers in Korea. And I had read this interesting article that was like, are virtual influencers the new kind of hidden factory? Because there's all these people doing like motion capture suits, like performing their celebrity charisma, but in really bad working conditions. So the demon ends up seeing this past lover, and gets possessed. Okay, I'll just skip the good ending. But they fight with the shaman at the end, and it's very passionate. In this case of demonic possession with the huffing of the lithium, is actually based on many real cases of demonic possession in the factory. In the 1980s to the early 2000s, from Malaysia, Seoul, China, there were a lot of cases where mostly Asian women workers were getting possessed with different kinds of demons when they were assembling semiconductors. And the menstrual blood demon is a real demon that Iwa Ong, this Berkeley professor who looks really intense, wrote about, except they don't smoke them, they lick them like popsicles. And I also learned about this idea of this possession, this history of possession in the factory from artist friends Anne Hae-young and Stanya Khan and Miljon Ruperto. So this is the way that the installation lives, and the animation is inside of these computers, which are glazed in a lithium glaze, a kind of dry looking glaze. And you can see in the back, there's also a porcelain and cobalt clock. And the workstation is surrounded by, they surround a manager's platform that has a two-way mirror that oversees them, but it's kind of undercut by these holes that are cut on the floor. And actually, I think I have a video, so I'll just play it instead of talking. This is the version that opened at Gwangju Biennale. Okay, this section is short. This is on iron, which is my newest and maybe just the beginning of the research that I've been looking at. I got interested in the way that iron is in our bodies and its industrial importance in human society in these kind of pivotal moments of agriculture and warfare. And also the way that we talk about iron metaphorically in society. I was also fascinated by the fact that even though iron is the most abundant mineral on Earth in mass, it's not that usable in the form that it's found. So actually the first iron we made beads and tools out of was from meteorites, like this kind of space technology. So cool. And also iron was found in the early 2000s to preserve tissue. So this T-Rex bone was preserved by the iron and the hema that was in the fossil. And when this scientist, Mary Schweitzer, dissolved it, the tissue was still soft from a T-Rex. And it was, she found out that from doing that, she could tell that the T-Rex had been pregnant. But the reason I focused on iron in this exhibition in Yixing was because Yixing is the city in China that is known for the special red, purple stoneware known as zhisha clay, which has that color from the high iron content. And also there's all this like weird terminology in ceramics. So this museum had this thing called soil bone, and then that's kiln sweat. And it reminded me of when I was doing my porcelain research. There was a lot of European spies who just could not figure out the recipe for porcelain. And so they spent all these spies into China, and they're like, oh, they make porcelain out of bone and flesh. And so then English were very literal, and they took actual bones from the animals in animal markets in London and Essex. And I don't know what they used for the flesh, but they made bone china from that. So I got interested in thinking about iron's place in our cultural imagination for describing strength or inflexibility, power, iron will, iron fist, iron curtain. And the whole sculpture is meant to look like an iron furnace or a dragon kiln, and has the kind of Ouroboros, or the alchemical symbol of the snake that eats its tail, although it's also kind of a dragon because I couldn't decide. And inside of the sculpture are animations that have different things that have been going on in the last 2 years. And I was thinking a lot about this poem that was read by a student in the Students for Justice in Palestine group at our People's Commencement, which was an alternative commencement that we celebrated the students who had had their diplomas revoked, just for, standing up to exercise their right to free speech and having the moral courage to speak out against a genocide. And one of the speakers at the People's Commencement read this beautiful poem by Langston Hughes, Kids Who Die, where he's talking about a different context, the young activists in the civil rights movement. And he says in the middle of the poem, "For the kids who die are like the iron in the blood of the people, and the old and rich don't want the people to taste the iron of the kids who die, don't want the people to get wise to their own power." So I thought I'd put that in there since we've been talking all many months about democracy and fascism. And it's important to remember to taste the iron. This is kind of what the phones looked like in the trench of the sculpture, and it's meant to look like they were just dropped, and there's fog that kind of comes as if it's like a cloud of tear gas, and these phones are maybe used in the moment of public protest and then get lost in the shadow.
Embers seal. Even gold. Tell me to get on the roof. Bad boy, dog boy, good in a angel.
Thank you. So if anybody has a question, just raise your hand. Or we can also just go eat cake.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I loved seeing so much more of your work than I'd seen before. I guess my question is about kind of explication or explanation and the work kind of standing alone. I think that like your work is when I encounter it, I just find it so, I don't know, like captivating and magnificent. And then hearing you talk about it, it's just a whole nother level and layer. And so I'm just curious about, do you ever have this desire to kind of explain more when you present a piece?
I mean, as we talked about, I always wanted to be a writer more than an artist, and then I thought it was too hard, so I became an artist. So there's always like a bit of a story, whether it's narrative or like nonfiction. But I'm a big believer in art being experienced like through the body and not just through the mind. So I try not to make text super front heavy in the exhibitions because I want people to smell them and feel them and see them and feel them in their bodies. And then if you're curious, and there's usually a way to like read or know more, like either in the form of videos or a story that's written across the room or whatnot. Yeah.
I wasn't going to say anything because I was going to tell you privately, but this is so amazing, so inspiring. I feel like just running up to my room and putting down some thoughts which won't make any sense to anybody, but perhaps you. Um, it's a question, but it will be presented as a not a question mark at the end. I loved so many things about what you said, which resonated to me in my own work. The indigo portion, for instance, is the reason Napoleon sold Louisiana, because indigo produced more wealth for France than India did for the British at that time. So there is that when you think of indigo now, and that particular thing of growing colors led to the Germans developing chemicals that were colors, which were then turned to war weapons. So you just made a continuation of things that are so important to me in my way of thinking. But then the two things you said, lithium, for instance, is the third, and I know nothing about these, the periodic table, but the lithium is the third, is number 3 in the periodic table.
I just meant it was 3 in my list. I actually have no idea what.
What is lithium? What number?
Oh, I had no idea. Yeah.
But it's not number 3?
I don't think so.
Look it up, because someone else doubted me and then wrote me a note saying you were right.
Oh, that's just a coincidence. I just meant it was 3 on my list. Yeah.
No, but
Yeah.
it's all right. Doesn't matter.
I don't know.
wanna
I had a
be wrong.
chemistry teacher that called me Pocahontas and spent the whole time trying to step on my bare feet because he was really angry that I wouldn't put shoes on. So I don't think I learned much chemistry.
Oh, that's all right. I learned nothing. But and then the other thing of iron. But we are always told that iron is essential. One of those essential things because we get anemia and you need more iron. But no one ever speaks of lithium. But I think that lithium is probably essential in the sense that they've found that communities that have lithium in the water have less depression, less crime.
Yeah.
That's why we should drink
Yeah.
Pellegrino.
And then you can also speak to demons.
It has a lithium in the water.
Yeah.
But as I say, I have no question. Just want to commend you on this spectacular.
No, thank you. And I've loved our conversations around colors and plants and rocks.
Well, thank you. No question.
Sort of relatedly, I'm just curious if do projects move from one to the other? It seems like there's a thread in one project, whether it's iron leading to another element. Do you see that happening sort of as you develop new works? That there's the last one has provided some kind of springboard, and do you have to vary it if you think, oh gosh, I don't have to do another metal?
Yeah,
variations within a theme.
Yeah, I kind of go by whatever I'm interested in. So, I don't know when this kind of happened. This kind of material history of contagion is what I called it. But it was a very useful, broad way of researching that let me look at a lot of different histories and a lot of different materials. And yeah, I don't think anybody is watching if I make work about cats or iron or what, so I think I can have a non sequitur now and then. But for my own thinking, it's like exciting to think about one thing leading to another. And like Jamaica mentioned, like I've been really excited and I just began looking at the kind of German history of colors and synthetic colors. And I actually had a great idea of a new piece I want to make from an image I saw from Susanna Kreiman, who's here somewhere, from her book that she made on Karlsruhe's nuclear reactor, where there's a kind of like history of color, maybe moving from natural to synthetic. Yeah.
So I've been kind of trying to think about how to put this into words, but it strikes me that the work, of course, I see this in it, so you can tell me if I'm seeing something that's not there, seems to have kind of war lurking in the background in various ways. So you started with the kind of colonialism, saw the conflict in Gaza in there. There was that brief flash of the girl who was hit by Agent Orange during Vietnam. Can you say a little bit about how you're thinking about the role of war and violence and domination in the course of your work? It seems like a thread, but I don't know if it's something that just happens to come in there or if it's something consciously that is informing the work.
I suppose it's just like a dark sensibility, but there's no colonial history that isn't entangled with war and violence, right? So I think when I started this research, I think I was really using it as a way to talk about, like, there's so much of a fantasy that art is like this nice thing or like this thing that is beautiful and sublime and like kind of exists separate from these kind of productions of violence and like is kind of made without needing to answer to those responsibilities. So I think a lot of the project of bringing in the histories of war or violence that these materials are entangled with is about reminding maybe the viewer that like our experience of beauty is real and it's moving, but it also is this thing that shapes and is affected by and is an effect of, like it's also shaping these kind of awful things in the world. Yeah.
I have a question just kind of from a practical perspective. I mean, you do with so much material and so much, like, I guess some of it's kind of antiquated material and some of it's like really technical or like elements and the metals, and then also like the dyes and all this kind of stuff. How do you learn to use it all? Is it do you have to go to specialist instruction, or you just kind of experiment?
No, I just have a weird studio where I have like buckets of piss and moldy things, and I try to shape things with my hands. I mean, I have a lot of things that don't work out, and I often wish I had a good scientist friend that like I could talk with. I haven't found one yet. If anybody knows one, too bad we didn't have a scientist fellow. That would have been useful. Yeah, just trying. I mean, I think of research also as like what you do with your hands, and like it's not just about like things you read and look at in archives. It's also like about these material experiments and what the material does and reveals.
Thanks, Candice. It's so great to see all the work you do and all these amazing things that you know and your incredible range of knowledges and practices. And that makes me wonder, how do you know when you're finished with the work? Like, it doesn't seem like you have a design, a blueprint, and then you exactly, or maybe you do, but like, how do you know when it's done? Or do you sometimes take pieces and then put them in another place with other components? Or I mean, when is it? Yeah, what constitutes?
I usually just run out of time. I think like when the indigo tent peanuts, I was given an extra year because of COVID, and it actually let me make it so elaborate in a way that maybe wouldn't have been possible. And I think it's usually a time constraint. Like, and then I do often like cannibalize. Like those animations actually also are in the piece at Whitechapel with the cardboard labyrinth, but there's additional animations and Okay, should we go eat some? Oh.
Candice, it's been terrific. Just as a kind of prudential matter, I'm wondering what your plans are for the piece of art that involves the co-founder of the Academy. I'm just kind of curious, wondering where that's going to wind up.
What, you're wondering where it will go?
Yeah, what its future is.
Well, it ended up being too big for the Kissinger wall, so I have a smaller one where he looks much more excited about the fact that cats are going inside his body. That maybe could be for the American Academy. I was also making an animation because, have you seen this meme where there's like a priest giving a speech and he's just sitting in his priest outfit, and then this black cat comes and it walks right inside his skirt of his priest outfit, and then it's like umps, 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 and all the cats are having a dance club, which is where the Kissinger painting idea came from. So I was like, I should really make this painting into a meme, and then the American Academy could put it on their website splash page, and it'd be like, wow, I want to go there because that looks like a lot of fun.
Let's discuss further.
Thank you.